Yitz, this week a burning matter to discuss.
Yeah, let's talk about the burning bush.
New Sefer Shmot, new chapter in Am Yisrael's history. We find Am Yisrael in Mitzrayim suffering from the Egyptians. Moshe Rabbeinu needs to flee to Midian, ends up marrying Tzipporah and lives over there by Yitro and becomes Yitro's shepherd, taking care of his sheep. And in the beginning of Perek Gimel, we find Moshe taking the sheep into the desert, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu reveals himself to Moshe through the burning bush. One of the more famous stories in our tradition, a story that we've learned already in kindergarten, has been following us all our lives. But when reading it in the Psukim, you really have to ask a bunch of questions on this story, but even a bigger question is, why does HaKadosh Baruch Hu reveal himself like this to Moshe Rabbeinu? When looking at Avraham, Yitzchak and Yaakov, we don't even know how HaKadosh Baruch Hu revealed himself to them many times. With Avraham, it's this, Vayomer Hashem el Avraham lech lecha. By Yitzchak, it's in a dream. By Yaakov, it's in a dream. So why does Moshe Rabbeinu get this big revelation with all these things around it, that he sees a burning bush, and then he gets closer and he has to take off his shoes because the land he's standing on is holy? What's going on over here in the story of the burning bush? There's obviously a lot more to the story than what we've been taught in kindergarten.
Yeah, and you know, one of the interesting things about this net is where this happened. It says he takes Yitro's sheep to where? To Har Elokim, to the mountain of God, to Har Elokim, to Har Sinai. What was he doing there? Why was he going specially there? We know this is exactly what he's going to do later, is take Am Yisrael and bring them and lead them to Har Elokim. So something very interesting is happening here, as you're saying, not only the actual revelation, Hashem speaking to Moshe, but Moshe is going through a whole sort of experience that obviously is supposed to teach him something. And I think the way to understand it is to look at where Moshe is at and what Moshe is missing to be able to actually accomplish his mission. And when we look soon and we see what Moshe complains about, when Moshe says why he can't do this, there are two main points. One is Am Yisrael, they're not going to believe me, they won't listen to me. And as Rashi says, he didn't believe in Am Yisrael at the point that they were worthy of being taken out of Mitzrayim. He knows his experience. He tried to help them out 60 years ago, and he ended up having to run away because they were causing more damage to themselves than the Egyptians. So he's not sure Am Yisrael even deserves to be taken out of Mitzrayim. So he has doubts about Am Yisrael. And of course, he also has doubts about himself. I'm not worthy. Send someone else. It's not for me, etc., etc. So these two doubts, his doubts about Am Yisrael and his doubts and disbelief that he's fit for the job, these two things are exactly what's standing in the way of Moshe accomplishing his mission. And maybe that's what this experience is about. Somehow this is preparing him for this mission. It's teaching him a lesson. We see that Moshe finds himself in Har Elokim. We don't see a description of the pasuk saying, by coincidence, like we see in some other places, Vayiker mikre. No, Moshe goes and seems to know where he's going. He goes to the desert, he leads the way, and he goes to Har Elokim. Maybe Moshe Rabbeinu is already in search for HaKadosh Baruch. He's searching, he sees the suffering of Am Yisrael, he sees the state of Am Yisrael. He left that 60 years ago, and maybe that's why it says that he leaves also Kohen Midian. He leaves his father-in-law, he leaves other places and goes to the desert where he can be himself and he can search for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And he goes and finds this Har Elokim. But when he gets there, what is he told? He's told that Elokim isn't here now. We'll get here at some point later on in our journey. You know where I am? I'm there in Mitzrayim. I am there together with Am Yisrael. And what he sees is a bush that looks like it's burning, but it's actually not burning. And Moshe turns, and that's what catches his eye. And as he says, he turns to see why this isn't burning. In other words, he's looking and learning a great lesson about Am Yisrael. Yeah, you left Am Yisrael. You see them burning. You think they may deserve it, but look deeper. They're not actually burning. There's a fire going on. You see the suffering on the outside, but the bush isn't actually burning. And Moshe turns and looks, why is this bush not burning? And what he finds out is exactly that Ha Elokim is not here in Har Elokim. We'll get there, as Hashem will say. We'll get here later. But if you want to find me, I'm there. I'm in that bush. I'm there with Am Yisrael, and that's where their strength comes from, and that's why they're not burning. Many times also through history, Am Yisrael was looked at, look how much they're suffering. Obviously, God left them. Obviously, the Jews are wrong because look how much they're suffering. But actually, when you look at history, you see the exact opposite. Look how much Am Yisrael go through. Look how much this bush was burning, and it didn't burn. And they continued to stay, and they survived every single challenge they've gone through. Moshe, don't look at the fire on the outside. outside. Look deeper. Look at the fact that they're still there and they're surviving through everything they've gone through. And as the pasuk just said, when suddenly Paro dies, they call out to Hashem. They never forgot. They know Hashem's presence is there. They feel it. Moshe, you want to find me? Don't come here. Go back to Mitzrayim. That's where you're going to find it. Look for Am Yisrael. Have trust in Am Yisrael. Look within their hearts and you'll find me there, not here.
Very nice. And really, like we always say in these videos, you have to pay attention to the words the Torah uses and the psukim themselves, because again, the Torah uses very interesting words over here, especially with the concept of asura na ve'ere. Let me go and see what's going on over there, that Moshe Rabbeinu says. We know that Moshe Rabbeinu already a chapter ago, one perek ago, went out to his brothers, Vayetze Moshe elechav vayar b'sivlotam, and he saw their suffering. Here Moshe does something else. He doesn't go out. He is asura na ve'ere. And this word asura in Hebrew has several meanings to it. One of them is, let me disconnect myself in order to go and see. It's not only turn towards it, it's not only going out, but it's even more than that. It's disconnecting from where I am in order so that I can see. But even more than that, the word asura also has the meaning of being tied up, of an asir, asur, a prisoner. And maybe what Moshe Rabbeinu is doing here is leaving his comfortable life he had in Midian with his family, going into the desert, and now he's taking that next step to tying himself up to Am Yisrael, tying himself to their fate, putting himself into their suffering, into their torture. And this is actually what triggers HaKadosh Baruch Hu to speak to Moshe, as the pasuk says, Vayar Hashem kisar Moshe lirot, that only after he did this act of asura, that's when HaKadosh Baruch Hu started talking to him from the sneh. And this is what HaKadosh Baruch Hu is waiting to see. And maybe this is why HaKadosh Baruch Hu next thing tells to Moshe is, stand in your place, don't move. Because on the one hand he says, don't come closer, as if coming too close is coming too close to the holiness. But then HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to him, the place you're standing in is holy, take off your shoes. So is he standing in the holy place, or is he not allowed to come too close? But maybe this is what HaKadosh Baruch Hu is telling him, is stay in your place. Now you are exactly where you have to be. You're in the place to finally really understand what Am Yisrael have been going through, what HaKadosh Baruch Hu has been waiting to see from Moshe. Because as you were saying, Moshe already knows how to lead in the desert towards Har Elokim. But this concept of tying himself to Am Yisrael, even though he's not with them, but he is putting himself into that situation, that is maybe what HaKadosh Baruch Hu was waiting for. And we know this idea from many other places, that when we turn to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and we really need his help, we have to first turn into ourselves and into the other people we want to help and actually feel the pain and be with their suffering. As we know from Tehillim, Tfilah la'ani ki atof, and mima'amakim kraticha Hashem, many examples of lowering yourself in order to cry out to HaKadosh Baruch Hu from the depth, from the suffering, from the pain. Because again, last time Moshe Rabbeinu went out to his brothers, it was right after Va'igdal Moshe, right after he was raised up to a new position in the kingdom, as Rashi says over there. And maybe the idea is that here finally Moshe Rabbeinu actually lowers himself into the suffering and ties himself up with Am Yisrael, like we were saying. And maybe another thing, again, when you look at the psukim to pay attention to, is when Moshe Rabbeinu sees the bush burning, he sees it burning, but he sees it's not being eaten, it's not being consumed. But then when he turns to look at the bush, he's asking why the bush doesn't burn at all to begin with. And maybe this is the other thing HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to show Moshe, that even though it looks like it's burning on the outside, even though you think you are in a fire, you think Am Yisrael are burning, it still isn't being consumed. The fire is only on the outside, but in the inside, Am Yisrael is still there. The strength of Am Yisrael is still there. The faith of Am Yisrael is still there. Just like we saw two psukim beforehand, as you were saying, that when finally Paro died, finally Am Yisrael were able to turn to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and yell out of that depth and remind themselves again who they are, what they are about, what they should believe in, that the reality around them may look like fire, but as long as they don't burn, nothing can burn them either.
Beautiful. And you mentioned about Moshe Rabbeinu being told not to come close. I think this has to do with the second point I said at the beginning, where also Moshe Rabbeinu had to learn that he is worthy. Because we see something very interesting. We always assume that Moshe is told that the place of the bush is a holy place, and therefore, he shouldn't come close. He should remove his shoes before coming close. But that's not what it says. The pasuk actually says, don't come here. You know why you shouldn't come here? Because the place where you're standing is holy. What does that mean? Here is where God's revealing himself. Here is where the sneh is. No. You're missing the point. You keep searching for HaKadosh Baruch Hu elsewhere. Search for HaKadosh Baruch Hu in Mitzrayim, in Am Yisrael, and search for HaKadosh Baruch Hu within you. Hamakom asher ata omed aleh kodesh hu. The place where you're standing is holy. You know why it's holy? Because of you, because of what you represent, and because of me being within you. You just have to open your eyes and see that. When you'll recognize that, both HaKadosh Baruch Hu that's within you and HaKadosh Baruch Hu that's with Am Yisrael and their faith within the burning bush in Mitzrayim. When you'll see those two, then you'll be ready to really go on your mission, to go into the depths of Mitzrayim and lead Am Yisrael back here to this mountain where you can finally ta'avdun et Elokim al ha'aretz.
Beautiful, wonderful. And of course, there's much more to talk about this story of the burning bush. If you have any comments out there, please feel free to write them down below the video and comment on this video. And of course, as usual, make sure you like the video and share it with your friends if you enjoyed it. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please consider subscribing. We'll just remind again what we discussed last year. Last year, we discussed what happens before Moshe Rabbeinu runs away to Midian. The incident over there with the Tan and Avraham and Moshe Rabbeinu being an ish and Yitro looking for an ish, and the concept of being an ish, being a person in a world which needs people to step up and be someone. We'll link that video right now. Shkoyach Yitzi.
Shkoyach, Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, and we'll talk again next week, Bezrat Hashem. For more Talking Torah videos on different topics, check out our YouTube channel.